and that he's brought his, Brooklyn noir and given us the opportunity here in Oxford to own it. So, and we love that. And we love that that's part of what's going on here with you and Katie and two lovely children. So thank you. And he was going to be in conversation with someone, we won't say who's canceled. So he's winging it. Bill Boyle. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks everybody for coming out. I got a saggy mic situation here, sorry.
I don't know.
Just drooping a little bit on me. I think so. I thought I'd try that. Sorry. Yeah, that's good. Thanks. All right, thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Richard and Lisa and everybody at Square Books. It's so good to be back doing this again. Yeah, so I was supposed to be in conversation, which is kind of the way these things have gone, it seems like, for a few years now. I haven't actually read from a book. And I thought maybe I would do that. Maybe it'd be good to do that for a change anyway, instead of kind of constant stream of conversations, which I think everybody probably got a little tired of over Zoom anyway. So I'm going to read a little bit from this new book. I'm going to try to read just kind of 3 shorter sections. So it's not going to be one big bulk of text. I don't know. I like to know what I'm in for when I'm in an audience listening. So I don't think I probably will be reading probably in the 20-minute, 25-minute range tops, maybe a little less. But I'm also going to talk about the book a little bit between readings. So this new book is called Shoot the Moonlight Out. It's set primarily in, starts in 1996. There's kind of a prologue section that takes place in 1996, and then the bulk of the book takes place in June 2001 in my Southern Brooklyn neighborhood. It's an ensemble cast of characters. I'll excuse me, talk a little bit about each of them probably, but I won't be reading from all of their sections. Yeah, I'm actually gonna start with the title of the book comes from a song that I love by a singer named Garland Jeffries. The song is called Shoot the Moonlight Out, and that's kind of where the book started for me. I love that song and I love Garland Jeffries, and I just sat down with the title and started writing, just thinking it'd be cool to call a book Shoot the Moonlight Out. And yeah, so that was the beginning, but there's also, so there's an epigraph from that song, and there's another epigraph from a poem by this poet named Enid Dane, who I didn't know until I encountered her work in an anthology of writing about Brooklyn called Broken Land, which is what Brooklyn means. And the poem is called Riding the D Train, and I thought I'd read that poem to start. It's really short. So the poet, again, is Enid Dane, and the poem is called Riding the D Train. Notice the rooftops, the worm-eaten Brooklyn buildings. Houses crawl by, each with its private legend. In one, a mother is punishing her child slowly with great enjoyment. In one, a daughter is writing a novel she can't show to anyone. Notice your fellow riders, the Asian girl chewing a toothpick, the boy drawing trees on his hand, the man in a business suit whose shoes don't match. Everything is important. That thin girl, for instance, in flowered dress, golden high heels. How did her eyes get scarred? Why is that old man crying? What does that woman carry? Why does that woman carry a cat in her pocketbook? Don't underestimate any of it. Anything you don't see will come back to haunt you. So those lines, the anything you don't see will come back to haunt you, are the other epigraph for the book, and they're kind of just lines that have haunted me since I first encountered that poem. So I'm going to read a short section from the very beginning of the prologue, and then I'm going to jump around into a couple of later sections in the book. I don't really know how, I'm not good at summarizing anything, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the 5 main characters, or 6 six-ish, maybe seven main characters in the book. There are 5 points of view in the book, but there's kind of 6 or 7 main characters in the book. The first one is this one that you'll hear in this first section, Bobby Santavasco. In the prologue, I think he's 12 or 13, I can't remember. He is getting into some trouble in the prologue, and then later in the book, the bulk of the book takes place 5 years later. He's a little older. He's, I think, 17 or 18. And he's just kind of a kid who does something stupid and then becomes pretty much just self-destructive. The other main characters are Jack Carnaccia, who's this kind of, he's a guy who has lost his daughter. I'm going to try not to give away how these characters are connected necessarily, but they're all connected in some way. He's lost his daughter, and is also kind of a neighborhood vigilante who helps people right wrongs, which he kind of stops doing after his daughter dies. And he winds up taking a writing class in the basement of a church taught by a young woman who's just returned from college in Pennsylvania to the neighborhood. She's returned home to live with her mom, and she's Bobby's stepsister, or was Bobby's stepsister. The parents broke up. Her name's Lily Murphy. So she's one of the other main characters. And then there's Francesca Clark, whose connection is a little looser to these characters until she meets Bobby, and her and Bobby wind up kind of going out. And there's one other character. Who am I forgetting? There's one other big character.
Marie.
Yeah. Oh, no, not that one. There's Charlie French, who's kind of the villain of the story. He's just kind of a gangster character. And then there are a couple of other peripheral characters. There's this character, Max Berry, who is a guy who runs basically a Ponzi scheme out of his Bay Ridge office. And there's a character who comes in later in the book named Mairead, who is Lily's girlfriend late in the book. And she kind of comes in and has no connection to the characters, but kind of has a pretty big role in the last 30, 40 pages or so. And I'm mentioning her primarily because I'm going to read a section that is pretty much about her. So I think that's really it, all that I need to say in the way of setup. I'm going to read just like 2 pages from the very beginning. The first section of the prologue opens with Bobby, and he and his friend Zeke go down by the Belt Parkway off-ramp, which is just kind of a, whatever you think of when you think of an off-ramp, off of a little minor Brooklyn Parkway and into the neighborhood. They go down there and they throw stuff at cars, and that's where the story starts. And it's that decision which kind of is the bad decision that leads to things going wrong for a bunch of people. Once a week this summer, Bobby Santavasco and his best pal Zeke head down by the Belt Parkway to throw things at the cars getting off at the Bay Parkway exit near Caesars Bay Shopping Center. Bobby's just turned 14. Zeke is 13. They like stealing CDs from Sam Goody and cigarettes from Augie's Deli and playing video games in Zeke's basement. They both have a crush on Carissa Caruso from Stillwell Avenue. They're both headed into 8th grade at St. Mary Mother of Jesus on 84th Street. Bobby was left back in 3rd grade, so he's older than everyone else in his class. Their teacher is going to be Mrs. Santillo, who Bobby heard fart during the Pledge of Allegiance one day. Bobby lives in a small apartment on 83rd Street, a block from St. Mary's, with his father, his stepmother Grace, and his 16-year-old stepsister Lily. He and Lily don't talk. Grace is just kind of there. His mother moved to California when he was 6. He never heard from her again. Zeke lives in a big house on 23rd Avenue. His real name is Flavio, but Bobby started calling him Zeke in 4th grade, and it stuck. Zeke's dad owns a pork store. He has 4 sisters and 2 dogs. One of his sisters, Giovanna, looks like the Virgin Mary mixed with Marissa Tomei. Bobby thinks about her at night. They come down here because there's always action. The cars funneling off the parkway, pausing at the traffic light. Caesar's Bay with Toys R Us and Kmart and other chain shops. The bazaar with its stalls closed down the year before. Shore Parkway Park, the tennis complex, Gravesend Bay itself stretching from Coney Island Creek to the Narrows, the bike path, the Verrazano Bridge looming, Nellie Bly Amusement Park where they used to go as kids right nearby. They started small with little cups of ketchup and mustard they filled at the Wendy's on the opposite corner. The first day had been the best day, which is why it quickly became a ritual. That day, they clomped a couple of cups against the windshield of an old simultaneously, the ketchup and mustard flinging itself across the glass. The driver had slammed on his brakes, abandoned his car in traffic, and chased them behind the tennis courts and onto the bike path by the bay. The guy caught them, mustache, an L&B Spumoni Gardens t-shirt, the body of someone who played softball as an excuse to drink beer. He grabbed them by their shoulders and screamed at them for a solid 2 or 3 minutes, an eternity given the situation, spit flying from his mouth like bird shit. He said he was a cop, and they were lucky he didn't bring him down to the station. They nodded, stifling laughs. Eventually, they coughed up apologies, and he let them go and told them to smarten up. They turned, ran, and yelled for him to go fuck himself, and all the guy could do was blow angry breaths through the bristles of his mustache and storm back to his stupid little condiment-splattered car. After that, they tried water balloons, filling them beforehand and hauling them in a bucket. But that was too much work, and the balloons didn't last long. Some even broke in their hands as they released them. It was Zeke's idea to try tennis balls next. They could always find a dozen or so scattered in the grass on the other side of the fence by the courts. The nice thing about tennis balls was how fast and hard they could be thrown. Bobby had a better arm than Zeke, but they didn't have to worry as much about falling short. The downside was the overall effect. Tennis balls just dinged against the cars. No one really thought twice about them. Could have been raining tennis balls for anybody cared. That was how they settled on rocks. I'm going to stop there in that part. It goes on for a little while. I had thought about reading that whole chapter, but I don't think I'm going to. Yeah, so they throw rocks, and that is the thing that kind of ignites the story. They hit the car that a young woman is driving, and I won't say any more about that right now, but it's the beginning of everything. I'm going to read something I'm going to try to do something that I've never really done, which is just kind of jump around later into the book and read a couple of kind of self-contained little scenes. I've been thinking a lot the last few months about how much I enjoy narrative detours, and one of the ways that kind of manifests itself, I think, in my writing, but also in just works that I enjoy, is often the kind of story within a story frame. So I'm going to read a couple of sections that I think fit into that, and hopefully, I think there's well, I'm not going to make any promises, but I think there's some funny stuff in them. So this is a section from kind of like 115, 116 pages into the book. This is a character named Francesca Clark, who is, as I said, kind of peripheral to the other characters in the story at first, until she meets Bobby, and they kind of hit it off and wind up going out. And this is kind of right before that. She's got a bad home situation. She lives with her mom and grandma, and she actually gets along with her mom. Her dad passed away a few years earlier, and he's kind of her guiding spirit or whatever. He was, an artist. She wants to be a filmmaker, and so but she also lives with her grandmother, who she hates, and she's kind of disappeared from Brooklyn into the city, and has decided to go after her, kind of the places where her dad used to hang out. He was a jazz musician and a poet, and just a kind of jack of all trades kind of artist, and had a bunch of bars he frequented and coffee shops. So she goes to this bar called Long Eddie's and is just kind of trying to be in a place where her dad used to hang out. So this is that section. Really, not a lot happens in terms of the plot. This is one of those kind of narrative detour moments where she meets a guy who used to know her dad, and they're just talking about her dad and telling stories. The name of the bar, as I said, is Long Eddie's. Long Eddie's looks like it's been around 100 years. A weather-beaten, hand-painted sign hangs over the front awning. The riot gates are down, though the place is open. Neon beer lights fizz in the foggy windows. When Francesca gets there, she knows it's the kind of place that might serve her. There's always a shot in the old man bars, and it's not that late in the day. Inside, tinsel covers the walls. A thick tangle of Christmas lights chokes the jukebox. Music is playing, jazz. Francesca doesn't know enough about jazz to identify who it is. On a folded open card table across from the shuttered payphone booth in the corner, a Virgin Mary statue with no head is propped on a stack of phone books next to a steaming hot pot full of chili and a pyramid of small styrofoam bowls. A few old-timers sit hunched at the horseshoe bar. The bartender is wearing an eye patch and an oversized green flannel shirt. He must be in his 40s, graying hair and a kind of alcoholic tenderness to him, a dead ringer for the actor Joe Morton. Francesca's thinking that maybe he knew Bill. Bill was her father. Maybe they were friends. She takes a seat at the bar. The bartender comes over, dish rag clenched in his fist. How old are you, he asks. 21, she says. You got identification? The lies come smooth and easy. I lost it. He nods and smiles. Okay, well, it might be best to move on then. This place ain't exactly full of excitement anyway. I don't need a drink, she says, surprised he's chosen not to serve her, but not hurt by it. She is, after all, underage. Could be he has a good eye for it. Could be he's just not old enough to not give a shit like the bartender at the keyhole. Can I ask you a question? You want to ask me a question? My dad used to drink here back in the day. Bill Clark, you didn't know him, did you? The bartender comes closer. Sure, I knew Bill. You say you're his daughter? Who's your mother? Victoria DiMaggio. She used to come in too. Man, what a blast from the past. I knew Bill well. He was a good pal, lived a few blocks over from me. I was here the night he met Victoria. Wasn't working the bar then, just hanging out. She came in with some friends. They were all punked out. They'd been to a show at Coney Island High. Bill had eyes for her right away. He pauses, leans on the bar. What's your name? I'm Pierce. Francesca. She extends a hand and they shake. You said my mother was all punked out? She was a fireball. Yeah, I can see her in you. Bill too. You're really 21? Now that I know you, I'll serve you. I'm 18, she says, unable to continue the act. Close enough. It'll be our secret. You, me, the walls, and these bums. He motions to the drunken regulars. I don't think anybody will throw up any roadblocks. He plucks an icy beer from a cooler under the bar, setting it on a napkin in front of her. Francesca takes out a crumpled 10 and pushes it toward him. You keep your money, he says. Just tell me how Bill is. Last thing I remember, they were dating. He brought her around a lot. One day they just stopped coming. My dad died 6 years ago. God damn, I'm sorry to hear that. That's way too young. He couldn't have been older than me. He was working construction and there was an accident. Bill working construction? I always figured him for teaching art or music. He was good at both. I don't know, Francesca says, starting and not exactly sure what she wants to say. She drinks some of her beer. I come into the city all the time and I've never come to this place, even though I know he hung out here. I've never been to any of the places where he played in bands or read poems. Most of those joints are closed. Everything's banks and frozen yogurt shops and Starbucks now. Marbled Sigh, that was a good one. I bet your mother mentioned it. Francesca nods. Bill Clark's girl, Pierce says, shaking his head. Nuts. Where in the hell did these years go? Poor guy. So what did he do? Move back to Brooklyn with Victoria? I remember them talking about getting hitched, but I wasn't sure it happened. Black guy, Italian girl, lots of things still stand in the way of that. Never mind 20 years ago. Yeah, they got married and had me and went back to Bensonhurst. My mom started teaching third grade. He worked construction. Bill Clark in Bensonhurst. Jesus Christ, I'm sure he loved your mother a lot, but that must have torn him up. He loved living down here. It did. Francesca takes out her tobacco and rolls a cigarette. Pierce watches her. She has it down to a science. Can you tell me a story about him? Anything? The years are passing and I'm getting further away from him. I don't know. It was so hard after he died, but that grief just kind of numbed me. My mother can't really talk about him without crying. I got plenty of tales, Pierce says. You know your daddy was a prankster? Francesca smiles. She has many flashes of him from when she was a kid. He was always sweet to her, and he tried to make her laugh, but he was also guarded, quiet, melancholy. It makes her happy to think of him having fun, goofing off. One time we were in here drinking. A bartender at the time was this guy we called Mickey Fluff. He was about 6'6", barely seemed to fit in this joint, made the ceiling seem even lower than it is. Mickey Fluff's thing was he had to piss constantly, and he was always complaining about how hard he pissed, how forcefully. Cracked me and Bill up to no end. Mickey Fluff would come out of the can and he'd say, man, it's like I was going to war on the water in the toilet. We'd be dying. A lot of times he'd complain his piss was sudsy. We'd be like, sudsy, what the fuck you mean? Francesca is laughing the hardest she's laughed in a while. She doesn't know Mickey Fluff, but she can picture him perfectly. It's 20 plus years ago, the East Village in its prime. Bill is happy. Pierce continues. So Bill gets it in his head that he's going to pour a bunch of dish soap in the toilet. Next time Mickey Fluff squirts his mean piss in there, the thing goes wild with bubbles. He comes out of the can freaking. You'd think a rat crawled out. He's hyperventilating. I pissed so hard, there's a million bubbles, he says. They're coming out everywhere, big soapy bubbles. Something must be wrong with my pissing parts. He said that, pissing parts. Bill hits the fucking floor, I shit you not. I thought he was gonna have a heart attack. We quoted that shit every day for the next year. Bill was alive and he came in here, I'd say it and he'd be rolling. Pierce is laughing, his eyes teary. Francesca's still laughing too, but now it's tinged with sadness. She never saw her dad laughing like that, or at least doesn't remember if she did. That was your old man, Pierce says. We had a lot of good times. What happened to Mickey Fluff? Motherfucker won big in Atlantic City one weekend, last anybody ever saw of him. I'm glad I came in here, Francesca says. Pierce tells more stories about her father, all bar stories. If he knew him much outside the bar, it's not exactly clear. It's all pranks and buffets and late nights, crashing in a booth after hours, carrying each other home. That New Year's Eve where they slept in the back of Oily Rudy's cab. He stops occasionally to pour drinks for the old glaze-eyed regulars. Francesca finishes her beer and he brings her another. It's silly, but she feels light, a bit buzzed. Pierce asks her about herself. Is she going to college? What's she want to be? She get the art thing from her old man? He reiterates that Bill was good at everything he did. Poems, paintings, music. Says there wasn't even an ounce of him that was capable of selling out, which is why he never got anywhere. She tells him she wants to make movies. He says she should go to film school at NYU, as if it's that easy, just go. Walk right on in, no money or application necessary. He says she should make a documentary about long eddies. He says he knows it doesn't look like much, but every night he can see the whole range of human emotions on display. Elation, love, euphoria, hate, anger, despair, all of it, maybe in the same face over a short stretch of time. A glorious dive, part Garden of Eden, part apocalyptic hellhole. She nods. One thing she's learned is that when you tell people you want to be a filmmaker, they tell you they're a great idea for a movie, and it's never great. It's always horrible, barely an idea, more like a sliver of an idea wrapped up in the blankets of bullshit. But Pierce's idea isn't terrible. Of course, she wouldn't know how to shoot it or even have the guts to shoot it. How would she get a room full of drunks to behave like there wasn't a camera there? How would she pick out strands of narrative to follow so it didn't all feel random and boring? At a certain point, Pierce starts doing shots of bottom shelf whiskey, which is all that Long Eddie's has. There's no staggering selection behind the bar, just a small gathering of dusty bottles next to the register, cheaper than the cheap stuff. He asks if she wants a shot. Why the hell not, he says, for your old man. Okay, sure, she says. He pours it for her, whiskey slopping out of the glass and onto the bar top. For Bill Clark, Pierce says, a beautiful guy. He knew that the rat's ass end of midnight held all the answers. She clinks glasses with Pierce, more spilled whiskey. She tries not to look at his eye patch. She throws the shot back like a pro. She hasn't done many shots, but she's done enough to know to do it fast, not to sip, to just suck it down and hope like hell she doesn't puke. The whiskey is medicinal, edged with a bitter tang. It lights her up. Pierce asks if she wants another, but she says she's good. She focuses on her beer. I've got these glue traps in my apartment for the mice, Pierce says. His good eye gone pissy. He looks like just another regular now, drunk and unsteady. The other night, a mouse gets caught in one in my kitchen. I'm in the living room on the couch, and I hear it trying to get free. It's an awful noise, like a baby trying to get off a fucking paper party hat. And I'm just sitting there staring at the ceiling going like, this is terrible, get up and do something. But I just stayed right where I was and I couldn't sleep because, you know, a mouse was dying in my kitchen and I was responsible. It's my fault it was stuck in the least humane trap you ever heard of. Francesca nods along, unsure where Pierce is going with this, unsure how they got to this mouse in his kitchen from Bill. The few shots he's taken have turned him into a slobbering rambler. He has that glare that drunks get when they start telling a story that might never end. Or it might end with them breaking down, or it might end with them breaking down, trying to kiss her or giving her $50 for her future because their future's lost. Pierce continues. For 5 hours, that mouse dragged itself in the trap from one end of the kitchen to the other. I was awake through it all. I went in to check at first light, and the thing had finally crapped out by the fridge. I swept it into a garbage bag. It was still alive. I took that garbage bag out into the hall and threw it into the chute that goes down to the incinerator. Then I went back into my apartment and thought about how I'm just like that mouse. Except instead of one night, it's been 43 years of me dragging the glue trap I'm stuck in across this city. You know what I mean? Someday I'm going to be by that fridge and I'm going to realize that's fucking it. I can't pull myself anymore. And someone's going to pick me up, bag me, and toss me in the fire. Tears in his eyes now. He does another shaky shot. Breaking down it is. I don't want to die, Pierce says. I don't want that to be all life is. Your old man shouldn't have died. I'm sorry. He deserved a whole big life. He deserved to see you grow up. It's not right. Thank you, Francesca says. She can't think of anything else to say. You sure you don't want another shot? Pierce asks. I'm okay. I'm going to use the payphone if that's cool. You need quarters? Pierce turns and opens the register. He takes out a thick roll of quarters and puts it on the bar in front of her. Here's $10. Call everybody you know. I'd let you use the house phone, but the line's disconnected. Payphone's all we got. Francesca says it's okay. She has a few quarters left. She goes to the payphone booth, pushes the accordion door open, and then pulls it shut. It's dark and dingy in the booth. Smells like piss and beer, maybe a hint of puke. Graffiti fills the walls around her. For a good time, call Teddy Bear Chuck. Fuck Bush, fuck Giuliani. Jesus Christ died for somebody's sins, not mine. More Patti Smith lyrics scrawled in red paint marker. A heart shot through with a cartoon dick instead of an arrow. It's quiet in the booth and she notices the music from the jukebox has stopped. She reaches into her pocket for a quarter, realizes she actually doesn't have any and goes back to get the roll from Pierce. She thumbs the rounded top edge of the wrapper open and gets one out. Nestled back in the booth. Things are spinning. Not a ton, but the shot was a bad idea. She needs some food. She thinks of that pot of chili on the table out there. Disgusting, sure, but it could be enough to get the job done. 2 beers and a shot on an empty stomach wasn't smart. Just as she's about to drop the quarter into the slot, Pierce passes in front of the booth and knocks on the glass. He motions for her to watch what he's doing. He dances over to the jukebox and puts in a handful of quarters. He punches some numbers. The first song that comes on is No Ordinary Love. He dances back past the booth again and points in at her. She shrugs. Sorry. He points more aggressively at her. The shirt she's wearing. Sorry, shirt. She nods and gives him a thumbs up, acknowledging that she knows he played the song for her. He smiles and goes up behind one of the fragile drunks leaning over the end of the bar and tries to coax him to stand. The guy waves him off, but then they fall into a sloppy slow dance in the center of the bar, rocking back and forth mechanically, the Christmas lights puddling behind them. Francesca drops the quarter in. I'm going to stop there because that's when she calls Bobby, and that's when Bobby, well, I'm not going to totally stop there. Sorry. I'm almost done though reading. I'm going to stop that section there. I'm going to read one other just pretty short section from even later in the book, if that's cool, and then I'll be done reading and we can do a Q&A. Hopefully I didn't read too long. So later in the book, a lot has happened at this point. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I'll try to set it up a little bit. Lily has forged a relationship with Jack through this class they've done together, and a couple of weeks have passed since their last encounter, and a lot of other stuff has happened that I'm not going to get into. But she is coming back to the neighborhood with this girl, Mairead, Irish girl she started dating and that she met in the city. And Mairead is a writer too, but kind of a successful writer. She's already put out a novel, and Lily is just kind of a beginning writer, hasn't written a book, has just graduated college and is kind of trying to find herself. And she brings Mairead back, and instead of introducing Mairead to her mother, who she doesn't have a good relationship with, she introduces her to Jack, who has become this kind of father figure to her in the short time they've known each other. And Mairead is a character who I didn't really plan on being in this book, and it was just kind of one of those examples, I think, of somebody showing up in a book that I wasn't expecting, and she started talking, and I just didn't want her to stop. And so this is a section where they're hanging out. Actually, I'm not gonna set this all up, but this is Jack, Lily, Francesca, and Mairead all sitting around a table. So they've all kind of come together in this moment. That doesn't really matter for the scene because it's just pretty much about Mairead, this story that she tells. Okay, let me just find the beginning here. Sorry, thought I had it marked. I'll just start here. It's kind of she's already telling a story, a little bit of a story at this point, but this is when it kind of kicks into higher gear. Mairead has the floor, a born storyteller. I have another uncle, she says, who got into clowning. That was his big dream, to be a clown, but he was an alcoholic bogger. Uncle Jerry pissed in my grandmother's living room one night in front of the whole family, himself, flute in hand, spraying the furniture. This part she acts out a bit. Jack's laughing so hard he's doubled over at the table. Anyhow, he shows up to my little cousin's Holy Communion in his clown costume, Mairead continues. It's a rundown costume, secondhand wig, red foam nose, wrinkled yellow jumpsuit. His makeup looks like a fucking Parkinson's patient did it. Forgive me for saying that. All the kids in the church are crying bloody murder. Why is there a clown sitting in the pew, they want to know. He's real calm, just sort of slumped over. Probably hung over something awful at this point. Kids are wailing, just wrecked. They either don't know it's Uncle Jerry or they don't know Uncle Jerry. This is at the Mass, Jack says, astonished or astounded. Sorry. Right now, my father, he is firmly against clowns, and he's had it up to here with Uncle Jerry's routine. My father, God bless him, gets up and starts beating on Uncle Jerry with my mother's bag. He's going to town on it. Communion kids in all their dresses and suits start cheering. My father's lost his fucking mind. Uncle Jerry's making these little noises, and they're not like I'm getting beaten up noises. They're like sex noises, grunting and moaning. Oh my God, Francesca says, this is amazing. Lily proudly watches Mairead spinning her tail. She's again thinking what a genius she is, how melodious her voice is, the same voice that's in her novel. So finally, Uncle Jerry is up on his feet, struggling to escape my father, Mairead says. The kids are watching a clown getting his ass beat all the way up the aisle. I'm sitting there thinking, how could this possibly get better? Enter Father James O'Rourke, this old demented fuck they usually keep locked away. 94 if he's a day. Looks like a skeleton hung with silver tinsel. But somehow, on this day of days, he's escaped and he's sniffed his way to Uncle Jerry. What he does is he starts yelling like he's performing an exorcism. He has this echoey ancient voice. I'm sitting next to Granny Cat. When I tell you she lets out a fart at this particular moment, you must be aware that I can't do this fart justice. It's massive, brutal. It sounds like a chainsaw. Really thunders against the wood of the pew. And the smell, I mean, there's several waves. First, there's this burning onion quality, but that only paves the way for the kind of diapery main stink that has enduring fucking potency. We're all choking, gasping for breath. I tell you, I can't cope. Jack looks like he's about to have a heart attack. He's laughing so hard. Mairead pauses to take a drink. It's around then that people start leaving. The smell's not going away. I'm looking around at my family like, did she poo her pants? I think she pooed her pants. Is Dad still beating up Uncle Jerry? He is. Oh, good. The communion kids are at a fucking loss. All the ways they saw this day going, this definitely wasn't the outcome they desired. Jesus Christ, Lily says, did your grandmother really shit her pants? She sure did, Mairead says. It was kind of tar-like, really soaked through the fabric. I heard they had to fumigate the church afterward. And what about Uncle Jerry? That's the best part. You haven't even gotten to the best part? Right. The best part is that Father O'Rourke, in the midst of all this madness, people filing out, choking to death on the stink, hops on Uncle Jerry and starts biting him. This fucking guy's got dentures, and Uncle Jerry's still making his sex noises. My father's disgusted. If there's one thing he never wanted to see in his life, it's an old priest biting a clown in the church. Holy shit, Jack says, you have a gift. Is that the end, Francesca asks? Pretty much, Mairead says. Someone came and collected Father O'Rourke. My mother took my father by the arm and brought him outside for fresh air. Uncle Jerry was fucking fine. He stuck with clowning for another year, but he stopped showing up to family events in his costume. We had to hose Gran down, which you might think would be a vast indignity, but she seemed to like it. I said, don't get used to this, Gran. We're not hosing you down after every poo. I'll try to read some of that stuff. I don't know if it's representative of the whole book, but it's definitely part of the world of the book. And like I said, Mairead is just and that scene with Pierce. Those are kind of two examples where characters kind of showed up that I wasn't really expecting and talked a lot, and I just liked listening to them and followed them where they went. So thanks for listening to those excerpts. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions or say something else about the book. I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
I read that book. It was awesome.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, so you do a thing they tell you never to do,
Yeah.
which is quote, write about writers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we were just we're talking about something else, but for me, really, anytime anybody says not to do something, it's just kind of a temptation for me to do it. So that's one thing. But also, there's so many books I love about writers that it's kind of ridiculous to totally avoid it. So I thought, Lily's the writer. There's actually a couple of writers in this book, and Francesca's a filmmaker. So I like the idea of writing about a writer who is at the stage that Lily's at. That she's just graduated college. She's not she's not an accomplished writer in any way. She's trying to figure things out. That's interesting to me. I don't think I don't know that I'd want to write about like a writer deep into their career as a writer or something, but I like writing about her in this moment where she is kind of lost and trying to find out who she is, both as a person and as a writer, and trying to scrap together something that looks like like she doesn't know what to do. So she tries to teach a writing class in the basement of a church just kind of on a whim after she's had a few beers, and is talking to a priest and is like, hey, I could teach a writing class in the basement of the church. And he says yes. And then all these kind of lonely old people come take her class. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really think about it too much, except that I liked her as a character, and I just kind of started with that and started with her. And I don't know, again, it was this moment for her as a young writer where she's just kind of adrift, and I don't know that I don't know where she's going to go with that or what she's going to wind up ultimately doing with that. But in the moment, she's trying to figure that stuff out. So I don't know, kind of long-winded, rambling answer. Sorry.
Can you say you don't know where she's going to go with that? I feel like all your books you can imagine all these people are living in the same world, more or less. Do you see coming back to these characters again?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think I always, especially now that the last couple of books I've written are set in the 90s and the early 2000s. So it's been kind of just fun to imagine where these characters would be now, or even just, like little characters who pop up for a brief stretch of time, and just thinking about building a book around them, that kind of stuff is exciting to me. And Mairead, like I said, this character Mairead, who shows up in kind of the last 30 or 40 pages of the book, I didn't really plan on bringing her in, but she showed up and took over, and she's certainly somebody, and she's also a writer. She's somebody I'd love to go back to and write something about, or have her be central to the story. And there's lots of crossover in this book with the world of my other books. I think there's the Brancaccio crime family shows up, which is in Friend is a Gift, and also in City of Margins. And there's some crossover, definitely kind of in the in the mythology of the Southern Brooklyn of my imagination. So yeah, I love that. I mean, that's really fun to me. Not to write necessarily direct sequels or anything, but to have just little characters from one book pop up in another book, or to go back in time and see a character who has died, you know, in the book, and you know, see what they were doing in the 80s or something. You know, stuff like that is really fun to me. Other questions? Yeah.
How far do you think you might go back? Have you even thought about that? Because I love the interlinking stories like we were just talking about, but have you thought about or have an idea for a story that could be 20, 40, 50 years in the past?
Yeah, actually the thing I'm working on now is set a little bit in the late 70s. It actually starts in the 60s. There's kind of a brief section in the 60s, but it's mostly set in the late 70s. So that's I don't know. I don't know that I can imagine going back too much beyond that. I just feel like I was born in 78, and the 80s and 90s and early 2000s is really kind of the time when I know that place and know it well. So it's hard for me to imagine going too far back, but I don't know, maybe down the road. I get too hung up on, you know, I think writing a period thing is, I mean, it's one thing to write a period book set in the 90s or early 2000s because I know that world, but if I went into the 40s or 50s, I think, and you know, for me, I mean, you can do it. I don't know that I can have that ability to deal with the period stuff and worry about the era, getting everything right. Other questions? Yeah.
Have you thought about a one-off, not in the Brooklyn neighborhood?
Yeah, every once in a while I have ideas that are not centered in New York, but nothing that's stuck so far. I got a couple of things that are definitely kind of floating around, maybe down the road, but I don't know. Nothing in the works right now. I got 2 or 3 books I know I want to write that are all kind of still in the Southern Brooklyn 90s, early 2000s, 80s, late 70s, kind of that whole time period, and definitely kind of sticking to that place for a little while longer.
I mean, you said you could write about that block forever.
Yeah,
Right.
I could. Yeah, I could. I mean, I think that's one thing I like, just kind of staying. I mean, in fact, I think I've been kind of closing things in a little bit and staying closer to my neighborhood in the last couple of books than even in my first few, which really wandered around New York a little bit more than the last couple have.
Would you mind if I compared you to Faulkner?
No, thanks.
Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know, of course I love Faulkner, but also I was, you know, when I started writing these books, I definitely was influenced by Larry Brown too. And like the way Larry Brown wrote about Oxford was the way I wanted to write about Brooklyn. And so that's, yeah, I mean, both Faulkner and Larry Brown, and I mean, probably lots of other writers you can name who have kind of a place that they return to always in their fiction. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes. Yeah, Ted.
Hey, Bill, kind of expanding on what you and I were talking about the other day, kind of a fine line between great and funny that you sort of cross, you know, over back and forth. When you started, when I first started reading this book, I thought, wow, this is a tough way to begin a book. This is very tragic. And yet, you know, laughing my ass off, you know, with it. You set out to sort of even things out when you start writing to take it lighter as you kind of go back and forth to really gritty stuff, and then the moments of levity in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Really not that much levity.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know that I have a plan usually. I think that's just kind of in my nature, maybe. That balance of kind of sadness, melancholy, tragedy, and then dark humor. So I think I'm kind of maybe naturally going to those places a lot of the time. But I also have kind of a twisted sense maybe of what's funny, because I think all of my books are comedies in some way, and nobody ever thinks that. So I mean, or at least black comedies or dark comedies, I think that, I hope that element's kind of always there, and maybe even in some of the tragedy, there's always an opportunity for that lightness, or that little bit of humor to slip in, and kind of take the edge off the darkness a little bit. Other questions? Anything else?
I think I can add to that the man who helped to raise Bill, his grandfather, that was pretty much his personality, right? Like he had that sort of melancholy and then be wickedly funny at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely kind of probably the origin of a lot of that for me. And he was also he wasn't a reader or a writer, but he was a great storyteller. And so I think a lot of my love of just stories and the way I use stories within a narrative. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just kind of have characters tell a story. And a lot of that comes from him. I think he was really good at that. And a lot of the mythology, a lot of the stories within stories in my books are kind of rooted in him and his friends, and things I heard them say, his best friend was this guy. My grandfather's name was Joe. He was a mechanic in Coney Island, and his best friend was this guy, Big Jim, who actually was the model for that story that Pierce tells. Was Big Jim used to come over to our house, my grandparents' house, once a week, and he was great. He was the sweetest guy. He was a big guy. He's like 6'5", and he worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, and he was just a teddy bear of a guy. But he came out, he would go to the bathroom and he'd complain that his urine was sudsy. And so I was the one actually who filled the toilet bowl with dish soap. So when the next one in there, it like really went wild with bubbles. And I don't know, I've actually probably used that story more than I should in my writing. I always come back to it. I don't think I've ever used it in a book, but I've definitely used it before in like a script or something, because it always makes me laugh just thinking about that. So anyway, other questions?
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it.